Well, hello there. This is Frenchie, aka Louis the Frenchie Monette, and you're listening to the Frenchie Talks About Women in Priesthood. On today's show, we are blessed to have Margeret O'Connor, the modern day David to our modern day Goliath, which is limitations based out of preconceived biases. All right. Thank you very much, Margaret, for being on the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great to be here. Thank you, Louis.
Well, thank you for being here. All right, so this is something when I saw the list of potential guests I can have on the show for this month, I saw you, I saw the topic, and it touched me. It's something I find is very important to talk about. This is rarely talked about and should be a lot more widespread knowledge because this is a fight that's been happening for a very long time, and this is something that's gotta change with our changing times. Now, could you give us a bit of a background, Margaret? How did you get involved in the subject of priesthood?
Oh, sure. I grew up as a Catholic back in the 1950s. And when I think of where I am now, as opposed to then, where you just never questioned your pastor, let alone Rome, and to conceive or even think that we could be talking on such a subject, even though it's wonderful to do so, when you go back to then and now. But unfortunately, so many Catholics, and this is what I'm trying to do basically. I'm trying to start a worldwide conversation for Catholics overseas and as well throughout the United States and Canada, that Catholics realize there's a whole hidden history of not only women being priests, there were women bishops, there were women deacons, and this is totally basically unknown. And what happened was, through the years, I had heard, people saying that there were women priests. And then, of course, you would ask a priest, well, no, there just weren't any, priests in the Catholic Church history. Well, there are so many religious priests, religious sisters that have written wonderful books. And these are the individuals that have really done all the hard work and the research. And lo and behold, yes, this is the actual truth. And this is why it's so upsetting, not only to me, but it should as well be upsetting to any average, like myself, everyday Catholic, that when you think of it, you have been lied to. Your trust has been betrayed by your church. And now it makes sense. I've always wondered, why is it that the Catholic Church will not acknowledge its own early church history? Well, of course, that's the period where there was the presence of women in various religious roles. And obviously, for them to admit that, well, that would open up another a can of worms.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to speak to Christian people because I personally I'm a spiritual scientific, okay? But one thing I believe in is if you have a dream, if you have a calling, no matter what faith you are in, you are allowed and you deserve to put in that energy, no matter what your circumstances, sex or race. You have a right, and it really speaks to me because I grew up actually as a Jehovah's Witness all my life from 0 to 18, and there's one thing I have always questioned myself is why wasn't any women elders? We called them elders, right? And it was all men. It was automatic. And I also thought of myself one day, like we often read the Bible saying, Jesus, condemns certain things that the priests in the time were doing, or that he would put them back in their place, right? And I said to myself, if Jesus will be here, what would he say seeing all just men, right?
Oh, he would definitely be disappointed because he had a woman, of course, Mary Magdalene was the apostle to the apostles. And right away, unfortunately, you'll hear people saying, well, women weren't made, in the image of God. And they've done biblical research, and this is not truth. This is just basically cultural prejudice, or that Jesus chose his 12 apostles, which of course were men. But you have to remember, back when Jesus was there, ancient Israel was purely patristic in nature. And let's face it, that wouldn't fly to have women, you know what I mean, in positions like that.
Yeah.
So he only could do what he could do during that particular time of his life. But there were definitely women with him, and they were in ministry.
Yeah, it's almost a pick and choose, right? Like, okay, that part of the history is just it doesn't swallow with us, so we'll let it go. But if you think about it, if Jesus let apostle having a sinner or someone who wasn't in a straight life as an apostle, why wouldn't he be able to have a woman, right? If he can forgive the sinner, it's just as logical to have someone of the opposite sex.
Oh, yes. And then there's new information. I found this really exciting because we've all basically heard the same story, where Jesus obviously sent out the 12 male apostles. It was Jesus doing the sending, and in a sense, it was like exclusively to the men. Well, there was a woman in research, her name is Ida Ramming, and she wrote an article, The 12 Men Were Apostles. But she came upon this concept, and it's called the concept of apostleship. And it said, anyone that was officially and devotedly sent out either by a community or by the risen one himself was an apostle. Well, then that makes sense. Beyond Mary Magdalene, you had the Samaritan woman, you had the woman, at the tomb, you had Nino, you had another new name is called Junia, and this that name for years was given to a male, but with the latest biblical research, it was definitely a woman. So, I mean, it gives more credence to that fact of having woman apostles when you find this, concept of apostleship.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense too, because of all people, believe it or not, if it's in your beliefs or not, still Jesus is portrayed as the most emotionally intelligent person that ever existed. He would have saw the value in having a balance, right? There's a reason now, like the president and vice president, there's a balance now. They bring something different, a different approach that definitely helps in the church. And Jesus must have recognized that right away.
It definitely, and boy, could we ever use that in the Catholic Church right now. There is no balance.
No, there really isn't.
It's sad, and especially with the sexual abuse issue too. I really believe if there had been women in the church, not saying it wouldn't have happened, but it never would have gotten to the awful degree, that it got to.
Now, let's talk about this unbalance, right? Could you give us a bit of maybe an experience, or maybe a part of what you've lived through when you try to make people realize, be it other priests or Catholics as a whole? Can you tell us any interesting or even shocking stories that needs to be heard right now?
It's not shocking, but myself as a woman, my earliest realization that I, as a lady, would never be a priest was when I was young, growing up. My mother bought my brother Paul a birthday gift, and it was a cardboard replica of a church altar. So Paul is playing the part of the priest, and my twin sister Pat and myself, we were the parishioners. Well, of course, it got to a point that we wanted to take over as priests. And I can remember my brother Paul saying, no, you're not a lady. You have to be a man. Only a man can be a priest. So, I mean, that was interesting. That was really my first perspective of that. But all I can say is, obviously, down through the centuries, it's been exclusively, men that have that position. So if you're a young boy in the church, you definitely have a role model to look up to. And even in families, let's just say from one Irish generation to another, well, Christopher was a priest, maybe Sean became a bishop. Now let's take that idea of this religious heritage going on, move it into a woman's perspective. What is there? There's absolutely nothing. We don't have any woman up on the altar. And even within our families, we can't say, oh, yes, Marie was a priest, or, you know what I'm saying? Siobhan was a bishop. And it's the idea also of the calling. If a man has a calling, I even put in the book, what would have happened to Pope Francis if he had a calling and he couldn't go anywhere? Would he maybe begin to question the man-made church law? I try to give them an idea from that perspective. And I do also have a free chapter in my book that is offered. And in that chapter, I really turn it around. A policeman said to me, gee, don't you have anything better to do? And I said, just give me a minute. I said, let's pretend we've got the New York Yankees baseball team. And he says, oh, no, I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. I said, oh, okay, just this one time. Okay. So let's pretend your son, wants to be a priest. A ball player, and you have to tell him, no, the American Baseball Association has said there never were male baseball players. There's only female baseball players. And that was until the woman changed the rules. So then I switch it and I said, now we're going to go into the church, and the Catholic Church hierarchy is in charge. And you have a daughter, and she's asking you, gee, Mom, I think I'd like to be a woman priest. And you have to tell her, well, the Catholic Church hierarchy has said there never were women priests. And lo and behold, sometime later, your daughter's on the computer. Mom, this is terrific. Look at this early history. I try to, from that perspective, I try to, put the other gender, maybe just to even momentarily try to get some sort of an inkling of what it's like. You are in a church and you were baptized by like the little baby boy, but that's it. Why can't you be a priest?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how humans really just don't always think about some things. Some things are just like inculcated young, like you said. Your brother who was really young, right?
Yes.
It just came out of him, like it was almost naturally accepted. This is how it is, and that's it. It's not something he learned like 18 years after. He was like that very young.
Yes.
And it's very deep inside of certain cultures or certain types of thinkings. And if you really go in the past, the church has a very predictable way of thinking that continues today. Look at how they treated intelligent women. You're a witch, we burn you or drown you. Any women who has power and can really change something and bring something to the church or the society, especially back in those days, you were not allowed. Intelligence was for men because power instead of nurturing. And also the association of paganism, who were in charge, who were the top people usually were women in control. So, and it continues today. It's so rooted that it really takes the internet, actually, if I can be honest, to demystify a lot of things. And this is why I'm really happy to have you on today.
Well, I'm just so glad that you're giving all these different perspectives, because that, to me, it's very frustrating when I have the truth that I'm trying to get out.
Hmm.
And so many podcast hosts right away, when they hear the subject matter, no, we're going to pass on that. And yet, what am I doing wrong? I'm telling the truth, but it's a truth, unfortunately, that they don't want to hear.
Hmm.
And some of the Catholics might think, well, who is she? She's not even like a religious sister. I mean, how can she, you know what I'm saying, be talking about stuff like this? Well, Vatican II had a different areas that they delved into, and one of the constitutions was on the laity, the everyday people that belong to the Catholic Church.
Hmm.
And it said that on matters of importance, the laity do have the right to speak out. And this is what we need. We need the everyday Catholic to realize there's nothing wrong with a woman being a priest. This was something that was in our early church history until the hierarchy changed the law. Now, this wasn't Jesus's law. This was man-made canon law.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, were they ever creative. You know how they did it? They said that woman could no longer be up on the altar. That put the kibosh on everything, for sure.
Now, talking about that, I actually wanted to relate something that I think would be transition well now. I have a friend of mine, his aunt. Well, I'll have to translate this because this is actually in French. So
okay.
bear with me. I'm from Quebec, right? So our main language is French. And we have someone I talked to yesterday as well over the phone, just to get a bit of a wrap up to understand her story. Her name is Madame Claire Bergeron. And she's one of the first people in Quebec to actually write a letter to her. I hope I pronounce this correctly. Diocese?
Diocese? Yes.
Diocese, exactly. To be able to be nominated in as a priest or as a servant of the church. And she was always interested in priesthood. When she was young, at first, she kind of joked with her dad, but it actually became sad at the end. She kept saying, why did God not make me as a man? Right? I should have been a man because this is my dream. If this is what's limiting me, why did you make me as a man? And, after a while, she's always been interested. She always had a calling, but the best they can offer her, and she can offer herself, was taking a theology course to be able to become a ethic and religion teacher. That was the best she can have. So she took it with passion, and she did it because in her mind that was a limitation. Well, so be it. But at one point she's like, screw it, I'm gonna do a letter. I want to become official. I need this is what I'm made to do. So the priest came to her house. And what happened is, even today's, I would have smacked the guy, okay? The priest said, no, sorry, we really appreciate your devotion, but you cannot become a priest because you are a woman. So everything concluded. She went away to wherever, what she had to do. But then he turned to her husband and he said, but do you want to become a priest?
Oh my
God. And exactly. And
talk
then,
about a slap in the face.
Oh, and the emotion, this has happened a long time ago, right? Even to this day, she talked about it yesterday, and there was this anger. There was like, how dare they? Like, I need this so much. I have something to offer. And then you say no just because something you preconceived that has no basis. And then you offer to my husband. Why? Because he has a pecker between his legs. It makes no sense.
Oh, I know. It's
and now, and I'm happy to say again, there's still limitations. And, if she maybe would have been born 80 years from now, she'd be in a better, she didn't have to be a man to be a priest, but she actually now does marriages and funerals. She found something. She's able to, at least at her age, continue progressing and not just being stopped because everyone said no, but find a way to still do what she needs to do despite the limitations.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. But wait till she hears this one now, and you wonder, why can't women be priests? This is just absolutely sickening, and this is what I call a deliberate, calculating cover-up by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. We're talking present day. Very close to present day, 1976. The Pope has his own commission. It's called the Pontifical Biblical Commission. And back in 76, the findings of that commission said that there is no reason why a woman cannot be ordained. So what have they done? They have just sat on that from 1976 to our present time. Now go back 2 years before that to 1974, and there was an International Theological Commission that it was believed that Pope Paul VI had set up, and they were questioning, looking at the study of woman deaconesses. And just back in 2016, Pope Francis started like a new commission on the same topic. Well, back in the 70s, they found 3 ancient Greek texts, and basically they said they were all in agreement, and ordination, whether it was a man or a woman, they were on the altar, they were in the presence of the bishop kneeling while he officiated over them in prayer. There was the placing of hands on them. They had like a stole around their neck, and they also received each to drink from the chalice. So yes, there definitively were women deacons. So here again, what did they do? They sat on it. There was no need for the 26th commission, and of course that commission went nowhere. So now they've got a new commission, and what I've heard is it doesn't seem too promising, because I guess a lot of the new appointees are, unfortunately, the status quo. But, this is awful.
Now, I have a question for you, Margaret. We see the proof. This is happening. They can't hide it they can't hide it anymore. This is out in the open. Could you resume maybe in a phrase or two exactly why is stopping them? Why are they still bucking? A short description.
Okay, I feel, number one, this would be such an embarrassment for them. They're very, very quick to throw out the word scandal. Oh, we can't have a scandal. Well, what do you call this? This is a scandal beyond all proportion. Okay, and number two, again, I truly believe in their distorted view, this power thing. They don't want to share power. And it's really interesting. If you ever listen, when they get into a discussion about woman priest, they'll throw that word out, power. So there's like sort of, in a sense, a negative connotation. The only reason that a woman wants to be a priest is she wants power. Or they'll call the feminist want, and they use that name in such a negative term. Any woman simply wants their own spirituality. They're getting that call, perhaps, to serve as a priest. They want to be able to answer that. So I would say to Pope Francis, it has nothing to do with power. It has nothing to do with, if you are a feminist, being a feminist. It's, again, answering Jesus's call.
And we said before, right, if Jesus would be here and the question would be asked, I don't think that he would have exactly the same answers as the church does, right? You would actually have logic behind it, and doesn't have an ego invested in it. And the priests and all the church, maybe not all, we don't know every priest. Maybe there's some that are there for, but they kind of have to be silent, right? Because, what I learned as Jehovah's Witness is if you speak too much, you have a reputation. Reputation is dangerous. Reputation squishes you. So there's got to be people who do support it, but they don't have enough support themselves to actually be upfront about it. Now, what would it take to make this change? Is it possible? And if yes, what do you think is needed to make it possible?
I think definitely, first of all, the Catholic laity here in the U.S., Canada, and as well going worldwide, they first have to realize that the hierarchy has just lied to them. And this issue of women priests is a subject which has truth behind it. And if any change is going to be enacted, I would hope first the Catholics have to, when they accept this, it's going to be hard to swallow, let alone digest, because you're at that realization, especially at first. I've been lied to by my own church. I mean, isn't that pretty sad? But then you have to decide: are you just going to be resigned to that fact and think, oh, why bother? Yeah, and in a sense, that's the easiest way, because then you don't have to get your upset feeling, that awful feeling of being betrayed, and nothing changing. But seriously, as I said before, Catholics have every right to speak out, and it's going to take the Catholics worldwide to make the hierarchy be accountable for their actions, and in this sense, for their non-actions of basically just sitting on these commission findings of women deacons, women priests. And the most amazing fact was Mary, Mother of God, Jesus's mother, was actually a woman priest. Her name was Mary Priest, and her title was the model for all priesthood in the Catholic Church. And priests would actually pray to her. And I saw a prayer card, and it was exciting, like with a picture of Mary, and she was dressed in priestly garb. And then, of course, on the other side was a prayer. But 1903, a Pope, Leo XIII, was able, with Rome's permission, to hang a painting of Mary, in her priestly attire, up. That was 1903. You jump to 1913, and things have really changed. That no longer is allowed. And then in 1926-27, they completely removed Mary's title from her. And when I read that, I was really shocked, because I'm thinking, what were they thinking of?
Themselves.
I mean, this is Jesus's mother.
Yep.
And this was really upsetting. I guess they gave it to some like periodical over in Rome to like sort of print an article about this. And the Roman official was saying basically, oh, you handled the question the way we wanted it, and it's better to leave this question basically like to go asleep. Well, how dare they refer to Mary as some type of like an object?
Yeah, and it's this is throughout the history of the world, right? Women have been a tendency of serve and you're there and that's it, right? You don't have that much of an impact in the world. Obviously, there are people who make a mark, like the Rosa Parks of this world. We wouldn't have Rosa Parks. We wouldn't have Martin Luther Jr. I cannot speak. I'm sorry.
No.
But we wouldn't have these people who stepped up and confronted the walls. That said, no, I'm not going to take the easy route. I'm going to feel that pain, but that pain is because I can't shut this loud voice in my head saying, you must do something. This is not right. And this is not where I should be in my life right now. And they did something about it. And I really hope, be it in religion, in sport, or whatever passion you have, if there's people saying no, you can't, they're saying it for a reason that does not come from reality. It comes from usually their own biases and their own preconceptions of what life should be. And you should never listen to them. If this is what you're meant to do, whatever it is, you do not stop until you feel satisfied. And even then, you should always keep pushing, because if you break boundaries, you only are doing good things to bring the world forward. And we need those kind of people, especially in the times we're living in today.
Oh, definitely. And it's so important to hear another side to an issue that you've never heard, because obviously, like, look at all the information that's just, it'll be new to so many people. But really, this is exciting. Who else could be a better model for a woman priest than Mary, Mother of God?
Amen. I mean, like, we as people hold our own moms as such high esteem, right? And it's true. And it's true. Like, even my recollections as a Jehovah's Witnesses, they had a lot of respect for her, but it was his mom. That's it. All the focus was on Jesus, and he really portrayed her as the normal person. And you would read about a bit, but then always pass on to something else. So yeah, why diminish such an important character, important person in history? It's important. Now, you said it yourself, right? This is a subject that we haven't heard much, that is starting to bring out into the light. Do you have, if someone's interested on knowing more, is there a certain actual people that you said some people were priesthood or people that push the boundaries? Could you give a couple names for people to search on Wikipedia, etc., and learn more about that history?
Yes, there's a Sister Christine Schenk, capital Schenk. And in fact, she has a book out, Crispina and Her Sisters, and she gets into the catacombs and really gives detailed information depicting like the woman priests, the woman bishops, and you like see diagrams, drawings. In the back of my book, I have an addendum, and I have all like the information that I did for my research. And then as well, I have like the latest videos on the subject of woman priest, woman's ordination. So, there's a lot of information there. And then even if people go on like YouTube, look under Joan, this is a Sister Joan Chittister. And she, oh my God, she could set the Pope straight. she I mean, really, she would know how to run things. And it's so pathetic. This is a brilliant woman, but she's very funny too. And, she has a lot of important things to say as well.
All right. And I'm also curious. You say yourself, right? You can probably put the Pope straight. If you could have the Pope for, let's say, an hour and talk to him, what would be the first thing you would say to him concerning the subject? If you can really, try to reach deep down to him, what would you say to him?
I would say to him, how can these so-called men of God not even follow, Jesus, your own biblical words of woman's equality? In Galatians 3:28, there is no male or female, all are one in Christ Jesus. Or as well in Genesis 14, where God created them. And I would also say to him, what exactly are these men so afraid of? That to share power with women. But I mean, seriously, I would be afraid if I was a man. And I mean, it got to be that time, that you were going to die, and you just totally ignored Jesus's own biblical words. And then as well, to help people, you're totally disavowing your commission findings. And I forgot to put in there's even Vatican II had this Article 29 in so many words. It's saying that the Catholic Church should completely remove prejudice of any type, whether it's racial, sexual. Well, hello. I mean, there's just so many things so strikingly wrong. And another barrier, you said, how can we change things, is that even to reach Catholics with the truth, they are so iron, it's like an ironclad fist. They will say, when I'm picketing, you don't know the truth. The Catholic Church told us there are no women priests, period. But one woman was really interesting, and she said, well, if what you're saying is the truth, then why don't we hear this in the church? Well, what happens, to give them their due, if something is changed in the church and no longer used, well, then the biblical writers years ago, they didn't have to keep continuing to mention that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so that, in a sense, it got sort of buried that way. But you can't say that the hierarchy doesn't know, this information. Back in the year 2000, there were three separate studies on the women's ordination issue. So they would have been up to speed, and yet still saying that there, never were any women in the church. They are the ones that are lying. They are the ones that are deceiving people.
Yeah, and I mean it's sad because I did a part of my university like studies. I actually took sex and religion, and it's not just about like the sexual act. It's like sex as in women and men, right? And
Okay.
from early on, you would see in a couple of the writings, men had a role, right? There is this ritual about like hunting, right? The hunting wasn't just about getting the prey. It was the whole factor of penetrating a knife into something that could kill you. And to penetrate is, being the act of entering into something else was masculine. And the feminine side of it was the hog. The hog gets penetrated. It was the submissive. It was, I am at your mercy. And the same thing for Greeks, even in homosexual acts, you would have the dominant, the top was the one that was penetrating, and the man that was underneath was actually not respected at all. He was the one who was submitted and was defined as almost an adjective of female, because he was submitted to the male. So it was such a rooted and stupid philosophy in my view, and it's slowly changing. But we need to progress things. And I had a conversation with Madame Bergeron at the end. I asked her, like, do you think it's going to change? And her answer was very interesting, because she believes it's going to change, but it's not going to change because the church has learned their lesson, or it's because they finally realize, you know what? Yes, they're equal. We should give it to them as well. It's because at one point there will be not enough priests in this world, and they're going to need the resource somewhere, somehow. And
Yes.
these women are going to be, hey, we've been calling for the last, I don't know how many years. Woohoo, we're here. And they're going to be like, okay, let's compromise. Come on over. It's not going to be a full welcome to the priesthood. It's going to be, we got no choice. Bring in those people. And there's going to be more battles, but at least at one point, the door is going to open for a floodgate, and other battles, other stories are going to have to evolve from that.
Yes, definitely. But the church knew, they did surveys back, I'm talking about the hierarchy, they knew back in the 70s that there was beginning to be a shortage of priests entering the priesthood. And they never did anything until they had to do something. And isn't it ironic that the Eucharist was affected, because with the shortage of priests in certain areas, they always can't have the liturgy of the Eucharist. So they've had to have like a communion service where
Mm.
they, have hosts that have already been consecrated, but basically someone is saying prayers and then handing out the Eucharist. But it's that I call it like a quicksand of inertia, and it's just unbelievable. They move so slowly, and God help us, or to them, that any woman gets involved. That's like they truly, they're like on another universe, maybe in the Twilight Zone. And people would say, now isn't she awful sarcastic? But when you see how you've been treated, you've been lied to, the definitive cover-ups that they have, it's time that we look at those actions, and we really have to question ourselves. Are those the actions of Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Is that the type of ministry? How is that mirroring Jesus's actions of total honesty?
Yeah. And I mean, like, if you would have went back 200 years from now and you would have talked to actual, slaves and slave owners, and you would have said, look, eventually you're going to have African American president and an Asian African vice president ruling over your country, they would have never believed it, and would have been something so far out, and even still far out for
Right.
certain people. So you never know, be if in 50, 100, 200 years, when the change happens and it progresses, next thing you know, we have a pope that's a female, that's a woman that finally says, screw it, I'm fixing everything. Let's hope so anyways. So if there's one person that has that is their destiny, that is their path, and they are going to stop at nothing but to do it, and it has to happen, you can't stop that immovable train. And I hope the church is prepared, because now I have a baby girl. Okay, she's 4 months old, and
Okay.
I love the day and age we're living at. Not for everything, but for what we're seeing, for the potential women have now, and it's not stopping. It's only going to go forward. I am confident that at least there is going to be at least one girl in this world that is going to be so determined to be the Pope that she is going to be.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I really hope.
We need a breath of fresh air.
Yes, we really do, in all aspects of life. I mean, we gotta share one day. Let's share the power. No matter what you're involved in. Like there's things like you listen to WNBA or hockey. I'm a big hockey fan. Montreal, we bleed hockey, and just seeing the baby steps. Some people will be critical, but just seeing in the NHL All Stars 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, they actually included female players to competition against the male players. This was not ranked; it was just skill competitions and matches, right? That
Right.
for the fans. But they finally, someone pushed through and said, "Hey, we are as good as you guys. At least give us a spotlight, right?" And next thing you know, there's going to be a woman coach,
Oh,
and
wow.
there was a couple women players in the NHL that was mostly men. One of them was a Tampa Bay goalie, Lightning goalie. She didn't last long, but at one point I realized, hey, that's a woman's name, right?
Yeah.
And then it made me think, yes, they have their league, but why can't they just play with the men? Why not just mesh the leagues together, right? And that's where I believe sincerely where we're going. And that's my belief in the good of humans. And if I survive the next 70 years, I really hope my darnest that we're going to see a league of everyone and not just males or females separated in the sports world. We have to share.
Yeah, that would really be progressive thinking.
I'm in Canada. We can't be more progressive than that. And I'm even for Canadians, I'm considered as the most left progressive possible. So, but it never made sense for me, and maybe that's was the good to be raised in Jehovah's Witnesses. Is as much as there are a cult and there's a lot of the bad sides, there are good teachings that no matter the race or or gender, you treated everyone equal. Now, again, hypocrisy with the leaders, right? Because never a woman would be an elder. But for the rest, they always inculcate that what you see is not what you get inside. The faith and the brain does not always reflect what you have as a preconception. And that really stuck with me. It's important to pass on that message because no one should be detained just because they're not fitting the norm.
Right. And this is something shocking. Pope Francis, when he was a cardinal back in 2010, wrote a book on heaven and earth. And in there, in so many words, he said that the women feminists achieved their goals, what they wanted, with the right to suffrage. Well, wait a minute, that's 1920. And do you mean to tell me since 1920, we aside from the right to vote, we have no other issues? But seriously, bring that issue now into the church, and that issue of women's equality is not even on the church's radar. And I mean, that's where you wonder why they can't understand that that's an issue of importance. If you have the Pope saying that, I mean, that really is scary.
Well, it's gonna take. It took a long time, but I truly believe what comes around comes around, right? They've been ignoring this for not even for 100 years, since the beginning, since they're changing, the roles of Jesus' mom, right? This has been engraved for so long, but eventually they will not be able to escape it. It's gonna catch up to them. It already has for the sexual abuse. For a lot of the aspects, and it's just the fact that we're having a conversation today is a sign that it's advancing, and eventually it's going to bite them in their butt, and they're going to have to do something, like it or not, to follow today's day and age. Because that's one thing you cannot go against, is the evolution of the human thinking. And if at one point you don't evolve, you die.
Yes, and as you said before, that priest shortage, that woman brought up an excellent point, because that is ever present, and it's really eerily in a way. If we could go back, like in the church history, and now we know there were women priests, obviously having women priests would begin to fill that shortage. But another thing that could help is back in the 5th century, at the council of, I don't know, I'll kill this name, Chalcedon. It said that unless a particular community chose a candidate for priesthood, let's say if someone from the clergy instead got involved, then that candidate, his ordination was null and void. And can you imagine today if that's all we needed was to have, like, each separate parish choose a candidate to become a priest? And of course, wouldn't that be wouldn't that be wonderful? Not only to have a man, but as well a woman. But it would really be more intimate, because it would be like from a small community. That would help. I mean, right there, that would help raise the ranks.
I do see something very interesting in that, but also sadly it would also suffer of circumstance and surroundings, right? So in certain places it would be an advantage because there'd be less politics in it and people would have fair shots. But you go other parts in the world, you have that. It's such a ingrained thing that it almost be a disadvantage, because a lot of it would be politics and it would be bringing down the opposite, because it's so ingrained in that society. So I do see the advantage, but again, depends on where you live, right?
Yes. And another thing is, how particularly when this priest shortage started, they were closing parishes left and right. The bishop has his own discretion, that he can actually choose either a lay person or a deacon to run a parish if there is that shortage. So there again, the bishops aren't helping. When you think of all like the churches and the different schools that had to close, and again, the bishop would come out with, a statement that this was due to the priest shortage, but yet, if he would have only enacted, that.
Yeah. It's the if only, if this, if that. One day the ifs will become he did, she did, it happened, right? It's
Right.
only a question of time. I just hope it progresses at a rate that
Yes, that's not 2000
it's like
years.
we finally got floating cars and women priests, yay! And we are on solar power now, and women priests new. I don't want to wait that long.
We'll
But
be looking, but both of us will be looking down from heaven.
All right, Margaret. So look, we're approaching the 15-minute mark. Again, I am blessed. I am honored to have you on the show. This was an amazing, amazing insight on a subject that everyone should, religious or not, consider. That aspect, because it is important, and there's are people that have this dream. Now,
thank you so much.
Now, that being said, Margaret, if people want to talk to you, share their experiences, or just learn more about you, where can they find you?
YourRadicalTruth.com. YourRadicalTruth.com. And thanks also for sharing that story of that other lady. That was
Madame Bergeron. Madame Bergeron. I'll give the information to her how to contact you. I'm sure you guys would have interesting conversations. She barely speaks English, from my understanding, but she understands English. So I'm gonna try to set that meeting up. I have a feeling that you guys would get along very well, especially on that subject. All right. So again, thank you very much for being on, and you take care of yourself. You stay safe. And again, thank you for spreading that message. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Take it easy.